Hello, and welcome to the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book.
And then see the movie.
I'm Luke.
And I'm James.
And this week is part 4 of our discussion of Stephen King's 1986 shelf-bending horror novel, It. Now let's get to the smoke hole. So part 4, July of 1958, we get Bill at the library with Mike Hanlon as an adult. They see a young boy check out one of Bill's books, and they have a memory of something called the apocalyptic rock fight at the quarry. And then he kind of starts thinking back, and we transport through time again, back to 1958, and we start with actually a discussion of Henry Bowers. And we hear about how Henry Bowers hates Mike Hanlon more than anybody else in the Losers Club. And it's this kind of carryover, I should say, racism from his father that he's kind of inherited, Butch Bowers. Because Butch blames the Hanlon family for all of the Bowers family's woes, Henry also kind of internalizes that and starts to view Mike the same way. And so Henry, we hear that Henry befriends Mike's dog, feeding him treats, and then eventually laces hamburger meat with poison, murdering Mike's dog. And then he comes back and tells his father what he did, and his father's so proud of him, he gives him a sip of his beer.
This is the first time that we get Henry less of a bully and more of just like a sadistic person.
Yeah.
The way that King describes what he does to this dog is probably the most gruesome death in my opinion so far. He
up to this
feeds
point.
him he feeds him treats, and he's telling him he's such a good boy, and the dog's all happy, and then he ties it to a tree and then just basically watches it die as the poison overtakes its body.
Yeah, I know both of us are big dog lovers, so I don't know about you, but man, whenever the animal stuff comes up, it always really deeply affects me.
And this was brutal. That's what I'm saying. I think it's the death that hit me the hardest.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's definitely saying something. And then something interesting that happened when Butch gives Henry the beer. He talks about how he will continue to associate beer with like happiness and being accepted by his father and all these things for the rest of his life. So then you can see the stepping stones that lead to him potentially, abusing substances in the future, and just kind of the path that his dad has kind of started him down.
Yeah, well, that really goes back to the thing we were talking about in the last episode. I think King is making a point about how impressionable children are, and how the things that go on when you're a kid can kind of define you for the rest of your life. And this is another example of sometimes those things can be really terrible and can have really lasting, damaging effects on who you are. So next we get Bill and the Losers Club down on the bank of the Kenduskeag, and they kind of come to the realization that it lives nearby, and they think in the sewers in particular. And Bill remembers talking with his father about the blueprints that show what's going on underneath the sewers, essentially. But it's like there's been so many different adjustments to it that no one really knows where everything goes down there, and it's this big maze.
I thought this was like particularly creepy because the idea of a sewer on its own is like pretty it's kind of a creepy place and like a nasty, disgusting place. But the idea that like so many different people have built so many different waterways and it's become a maze that nobody can get through leads everyone to believe, obviously, that this is like its lair. Somehow he's influenced people to, he's either, I think they at one point they talk about how like certain blueprints have gone missing and stuff, and they can't really find certain areas within it. So people who have to go in and do any sort of maintenance sometimes will go missing, and that's all. I think that's all by its design.
Yeah, it's really created this like perfect layer for it under the city where no one can really find it and people get lost and disappear. We learned that Bill thinks that if he could just say the phrase, he he thrusts his fist against the post and still insists he sees the ghosts, to his mother, that it would fix all their problems. We get confirmation that it looked like a werewolf for Richie, but maybe not for everybody else. And then we get our first discussion of what it might actually be. And there's a bunch of different creatures listed, like a Manitou, a Talus. We hear about the ritual of Chud, whichever it is. And it's a really, I definitely want your reaction to this ritual. Apparently, you go to this thing, this like glamour shapeshifter. So you stick out your tongue, it sticks out its tongue, and you each bite into each other's tongues and like lock into each other. And then you start telling jokes and riddles. And then if the human laughs first, the Talus kills him. But if the man can make the Talus laugh, then it goes away for 100 years.
So this is interesting because our feedback from last week was about the turtle, who we've kind of realized with this section here, we got information that we didn't have last section. So to answer that feedback that we got even more, this turtle or spirit or whatever it is, it's called Chud. And I guess it's part of a Himalayan ritual, like some ancient Himalayan ritual where, like you say, they bite down on each other's tongues and tell jokes. And I can already feel the end game of this story with this ritual. And like we're finding out that it is probably some sort of glamour.
Do you think that we're headed towards this happening? That this is going to literally take place?
Yeah, I think so. Something similar. Maybe not exactly this, but I think that the tongue, maybe it's like a battle of tongues or something like that, and they have to best it or Pennywise at his own kind of sadistic game or something like that. The thing that I really like is that now we've kind of gotten confirmation of what this, with another thing that happens in this chapter and this, we're kind of starting to see the form of what it is, this entity. It's like becoming like something. It's seeming like it's defeatable, or it's an actual, it's not just like an idea anymore. It's
something with substance.
Yeah, he's a glamour. So that means that he's giving everybody visions or giving everybody like personalized fears.
Okay, so next up, we get we get 5 bullies now. It's kind of this like cosmic coincidence that they're all going to set off fireworks at the same time that the Losers Club is going to the same place to set off fireworks, the quarry. But on the road, they encounter Mike Hanlon and basically chase after him after Henry Bowers decides he wants to like put firecrackers in his boots and basically torture him. And we get some stuff where Victor is looking at Henry and realizing that Henry is like out of control and a little bit insane and possibly going to kill Mike. And then we get this kind of this chase is going on at the same time while the Losers Club is heading to the quarry. At one point, one of them makes a joke about piranhas being in the Barrens in the Kunduskig, and then they actually see these like giant goldfish, orange goldfish looking things with giant teeth that they realize are like a manifestation of it. Eventually they arrive at the quarry. Mike, running from the bullies, they start throwing cherry bombs at him, and then that's when Henry Bowers reveals to Mike that he killed his dog, which kind of ends up giving Mike some courage to kind of fight back, and he yells at Henry, throws coal at him, kicks him in the face when he's trying to get away, and then climbs the fence and escapes. And then the Losers Club hear the M80 go off, which gets all of their attention, and the two groups come together, and the Losers Club kind of all gather around and form a line in front of Mike to protect him.
This is the beginning of Mike joining the Losers Club. So as soon as he shows up, the Losers Club is complete. All 7 of them are there. And something actually I wanted to mention from last section is they talked about how they all stood in a circle in the water and cut their hands with some piece of glass or something like that. So I think that also has something to do with that ritual, that where they need 7 people and maybe they have to taunt it or whatever they're going to have to do. Something interesting is Bill has this sort of like premonition that something bad is going to happen. So they all start picking up rocks and loading their pockets with rocks because they know like there's a threat incoming. And then they all kind of face off against Henry.
There's a lot of talk in this section about this feeling of fate and feeling of that the group is meant to be together. And especially once Mike arrives, they even say like, now it's begun. But before all that, they have this apocalyptic rock fight with the bullies, which is like written like it's a freaking battle out of World War II. Like it's really, it's really high action. There's just rocks flying everywhere. There's blood, people getting smashed in the face. Ben tackling Henry at one point. Finally, the Losers Club is victorious, especially after Bill kind of scares off Henry and Victor. And they leave, and that's when they really realize that now with Mike, the club is complete, the circle is complete.
I liked when, like you're saying, this battle was going down, this epic end of the world battle was going on with these rocks being thrown by these kids. Bill kind of really showed himself as the leader. He's done it so many times throughout the book, but he stepped up and was like taking all these hits, and he didn't even matter to him. It was just like getting hit in the shoulder and the hip and all these places, and then he's still like bearing down on these three like bigger kids and just like nailing them with rocks, and he kind of motivates all the rest of the kids, and they all get behind him.
Yeah, all right. So next up, we're back in the library with the adults, and we get Mike talking to everybody, and we hear a mention of the smoke hole, but things are a bunch of things are discussed really opaquely without going into detail, and we kind of suspect that we're going to learn more about each thing. And then Mike goes to get a beer from the refrigerator, and balloons drift out. And he sees the severed head of 11-year-old Stanley Uris, and his mouth is stuffed with bird feathers, which he recognizes as the feathers from the bird that he saw. The head opens its eyes, and it says something like, "Just thought I'd join you, Mike." It basically tells them that they can't hope to win without Stan being there. That without a seventh, that they're doomed. And then the head rolls out, says "beep beep Mikey," and then pops like a balloon and disappears. And then Mike remembers going down to the Barrens and joining up with the kids with the Losers Club as if he was part of the crew all along.
Stan is the only one who isn't there, and the thing that would affect all of Mike tells everyone to run into his office where he was getting the beer, and everyone sees Stan's head, his childhood head, and I think that just by it being young Stan, it's going to affect the group a lot more and make them really think about the fact that they are down to 6 and they're going to have to do it without a 7th, which makes me wonder, is there going to be a 7th, a last minute sub in or something like that, who's able to help them take down this guy? Because it seems like it's part of a ritual. They might be able to do it without him, but last time they didn't.
Any thoughts about who that could be?
I'm not sure that anybody's really been seen as important enough. Maybe just as a curveball, maybe like Henry steps up and like does something like a little redemptive move. Maybe I think that's really the only person. I don't think it'd be like Audra or Tom or anybody like that. So yeah, if I had to guess, if there was going to be a 7th, I think Henry might turn on Pennywise.
Okay. All right. So next we get Mike joining them down by the Kanduskig, and he learns that they're going to dig a hole to be their new clubhouse, with Ben kind of supervising the excavation of all this soil. And he tells them that he's seen the clown before. They all kind of share their stories with him, and he remembers seeing it handing out balloons during the parade on July 4th, where he was marching in the marching band. And then he tells them about the giant bird. We got Richie and Bill heading to the library, and the others begin digging the clubhouse. They talk about Mike's story, saying that it's his own personal monster, and now that he shared it with them, they all share that form, and that they could all see the bird now. And then they go to the library to research how to make a silver bullet.
They're all going to the library to make this silver bullet. because they've seen it in the movies. They've seen that like a silver bullet is usually good against almost every kind of monster. It can take down almost anything. And I think just the idea that like it's so absurd that it just might work, in my opinion. Like I think that like the silver, making like a silver bullet and shooting it with it, or launching it at it, might be enough to like anger him. Like I don't think it's necessarily going to kill him, but I think it's the way that you get at him is by doing something either ridiculous or kind of messing with him. So I think maybe the silver bullet, because it's from movies and stuff, maybe it has something to do with, that's the power that they're getting there, is that they're just confident that they've seen it work in movies, so maybe it'll work in real life.
So this reminds me of some of the feedback we got this week. We got a tweet to our at Ink to Film account from Erica, and she pointed out that silver is a recurring thing in this book, and that not only is it the silver dollars and the silver bullets, but also Bill's bike is called silver. And we noticed that Pennywise is often wearing silver. And I don't know, she kind of asked me about it, and I'll ask you, what do you think that is? Like, why is King doing that?
I think maybe it has like something to do with what I was saying about how the kids see it as important. They see this as like a powerful thing. So I think that leads to it being powerful in their minds. And also because it's powerful to them, Pennywise will see it as a threat. So I don't know why Pennywise, I don't know how the connection leads into Pennywise wearing silver as well. But I think that the idea that the bike is called silver and they've seen silver bullets work against monsters in movies, I think that this is just like them lending their like almost imagination or like their power to something and giving it power in their minds is going to be effective against Pennywise in the future.
Which that's like a direct thing that's talked about in a later part. Okay, we'll keep moving on here. So they come back and they find that this is sometime later, the hole is nearly finished and the clubhouse is nearly done. And we've learned that they've basically built this bunker. And of course it's put together really well because Ben oversaw it. And it has a trapdoor that closes down. It has sod over top of it so that when they're down underneath, like no one even knows they're down there. And we get Richie making a bunch of racist jokes, aka Jeff Dunham. Then they all kind of laugh it off. We hear about the dead body of a 9-year-old who none of them see. Then Mike has brought his father's photo album. So they all open it up and look at it. And they see pictures from like going back to like late 1700s and like drawings, and they start noticing that there's a clown in almost every picture. And then that little part ends with Pennywise coming to the forefront of one of the pictures and pressing his face against the plastic covering and basically taunting them. And then they slam it shut, and Bill understands that it wants them to be afraid. And so he tries to tell them all that they have to move on and that they can't like think about it too much and get afraid, because that's what he wants.
Yeah, specifically the person who's getting extremely upset by this is Stan. And in an earlier episode, I mentioned how Eddie was going to be the one who was going to be the liability within the group because of the inhaler, and he just seemed like he didn't cope well with like how his mom treated him, and like that played out into his everyday life. But it seemed from this section, I'm realizing that Stan he's the weakest link because he's not there in the future, which showed that clearly he couldn't handle it. And so obviously as a kid, they talk about in this book a lot how kids are more malleable. They're able to deal with situations easier, and they can just kind of like accept it and have it be a part of their life. Like a monster being real is something that a child can kind of perceive, but like if that happened to an adult, they would go insane. So I think that Stan as a kid, it's just showing that Stan as a kid was just malleable enough to deal with all the situations that were going on, even though he had his friends there to help him through it. And then as an adult, they talked about their adults just aren't able to handle the fact that Pennywise is real, and so he ends his life. And so going forward, I think that we're going to see Stan be definitely a liability, because he is in this situation. He's really afraid of the book. Pennywise is pressing his face out, and he can't believe that it's happening, and he's like, no, this can't be real. And then Bill forces him to stand up to it and say, no, this is real. Just accept it and just know that we can beat him, kind of.
Yeah, it gives me the sense that maybe if Bill had been there with him when he got the call, he might have been able to handle it. But when he was out on his own with no one else to help, like, he just couldn't handle learning that thing from his past was back. Yeah, I agree. I think you're right. You're right on it there. So chapter 15 we get next, and it's Richie, and he's back as an adult. They're all drinking in the library, talking about the past, and then they remember the smoke hole. And so then we jump back again into the past, and we see them all arriving at the clubhouse, and we learn they're going to perform a ceremony that's a Native American ceremony where you burn a bunch of green wood, fill up a room with smoke, and then everybody sits around it breathing it in and having visions. And it's kind of like a contest to see who can last the longest, and basically because you're not getting any air, you start to hallucinate. And they decide that they have to do this. And they draw straws to see who's going to sit out to keep watch. And at first they try and make Bev do it because she's a girl, but she doesn't have any of that. And so then they draw or matches, not straws. And they're looking for the burnt match. When they draw them, they find that no match is burnt. So they take that as this like universal sign that they all need to go into the smoke hole. And so they do.
These kids have like the coolest fort of all time. They dug a 5 foot by 5 foot hole in the ground and then built a trapdoor over top of it and put sod on top. Even right now, I'm envious of how cool that is. Like, I would love to have like a little fort that I could go hang out in like that. So I just like that it's another situation where Ben is leading the pack and like kind of like telling them how to build it, and then Bill is overseeing it. I just thought that was cool that they built that fort together, and then it became very useful when they went in to do this Native American ritual, which I thought this is one of my favorite sections in the whole book.
Yeah.
Because of how off the wall it gets and how it's just so fun.
It gets real weird. So speaking of, they light up the fire, a bunch of green wood, and it starts billowing out smoke. Everyone's sitting around it. And then we get Stan goes first. He's out of there. Then next it's Ben, then Eddie. And then Bev, like, they have a little bit more time. They sit around, keep breathing in the smoke. Then Bev has to go. Basically each person starts coughing and just has to get out of there. It becomes where it's Mike, Bill, and Richie. And surprisingly, it's Bill next who has to go. He just can't do it, and he has to leave. And then it's left with Mike and Richie, and they're just kind of staring at each other. And they start having this like conversation where they're just talking normally. And Richie starts to feel like his lungs adjust, and now he's breathing in smoke like it's air. The room keeps, like, the proportions of the room keep shifting. It seems much larger than it is. They hold hands, and then they float through fog and mist and go back to the ago, which we learned is basically their term for long, long ago. And sure enough, they're in something from maybe 1 million years ago, and they're in the same spot in Derry, but there's no town, there's no people, there's just these like giant weird birds and fish and odd animals that they don't recognize. And then the animals start to flee. They hear a sound and a vibration, and it comes out of the sky. And Mike and Richie realize that that's what they're seeing, the arrival of it 1 million years ago. It looks like a flaming match head. That's a direct quote. And they keep having this like back and forth about whether or not it was a spaceship, and then they say it was or it wasn't. And it's like a lightning coming out of it, and it basically is crashing to the earth. Then they get woken up, and Ben and Bill have pulled them out of the smoke hole, and they're gasping for breath.
So it is like this interdimensional space being, or supposedly. I don't know how literally we're supposed to be drawing from this, but I think it's supposed to be like a metaphor for the fact that like it is this like entity that isn't, it's so old, it's from so long ago. Do you think this is literal? Do you think that this actually happened?
So I think the thing that you could put in the column of this is literal is that they both tear their genes up when they're running in the dream or in the vision, and when they come back to the present, they both have their genes torn up that weren't torn up before they had the vision. So that's like there's some sort of manifestation of what happened. Now, does that mean it necessarily was 100% true? I don't know, but I got a feeling that like they literally were transported back in time, at least their consciousness, and they witnessed something that actually happened.
Well, they were definitely not there anymore because when Ben and Bill came in to drag out Richie and Mike, they were running around the small little 5x5 fort that they had made under the ground, and they were running around and said that it was like the size of a ballroom trying to find them, feeling around because it was so smoky they couldn't see them. And they were like, we checked everywhere, and then it wasn't, and then it was, we heard you guys screaming, but we couldn't find you physically. You weren't there. And then out of nowhere, you grabbed my hand, and they kind of pulled them into existence again, which I believe that they weren't there anymore. I just wonder, is it really this like interdimensional space being, or is it just kind of like he's been around forever? Is this King's way of being like he's been around forever? Like, I don't think we're supposed to be able to process exactly what he is from the context.
I think both of us are coming at it from someone who hasn't read a ton of other King novels. I have heard that he has an overarching cosmos kind of. There's a lot of similarities between different supernatural forces and different books and overlap. And I've heard that the Dark Tower series deals a lot with this kind of like other side and other place. But I don't know enough about it to really comment. But I think it's still valid to look at it as someone who is just reading this book on its own and how it affects us, because I think plenty of people that could be the case. And yeah, to me, it's very odd, but it seems like a combination of something that's interdimensional and also interstellar and also from another place that doesn't belong here.
And then they talked about how when it collided with the ground, it created this huge crater. And then
in downtown, where downtown would be.
Right. So where downtown would be, it created this crater. So like maybe that evil spawned from there, you know, maybe just colliding with that area, it claimed that area, and forever it would be this cursed land.
Which explains why it's in Derry, Maine, of all places. Like, that kind of is an explanation for the location, right? All right, so next up, we get chapter 16, and we get Eddie in the present, and his arm's hurting from an old injury. It's time for him to tell a story. This is we start to learn that basically this part's going to be broken up into each adult taking a turn to tell a story. And it's like as they remember it, too. They're kind of remembering it as they tell it. And Eddie tells the story of going to Mr. King's pharmacy, where he's there to pick up his medicine for his mother. And Mr. King decides he's going to take him into the back and reveal to him that the medicine he's been having is a placebo. It's kind of really creepy. It's like Mr. King is kind of seems really excited about placebos and how they work. And he's taking like a weird pleasure in kind of shattering this kid's worldview and letting him know that it's all in his mind, which really scares Eddie because he keeps thinking like, I'm not crazy. And then, he basically runs away from Mr. King and out into the road.
At first, I thought something really awful was going to happen here. I thought we were going to get a situation where like Eddie had been molested or something like that, because he was being so creepy about it and so weird. Yeah. And I don't know if it was this guy's way of getting back at Eddie's mother, because he wasn't a fan of Eddie's mother and kind of like shattering her whole world as well as Eddie's. But it was weird because he just pulled him into his back office, which he had never done before, and then started telling him that this medicine isn't helping anything. This whole perceived illness is all in your head.
We haven't got there yet, but there's talk about power later, and how power is like behind everything. And in the past, we've talked about how these bullies want power and how Tom Rogan wants power over Bev. And I think this is a situation where the pharmacist is kind of getting off on having this power, and where he's just been administering tap water to this kid and giving him these false cures. And so it's another situation, I think, where it's all about power. And that's why I think it strikes you as being so similar to some of these other scenes where it's more about some sort of actual physical abuse. So yeah, I think I totally agree. It's like there's a real creepiness there, and it was clear that there was something off about how Mr. Keen was really delighting in what he was doing. All right, so next up, Eddie is outside, and he encounters the bullies. And this is the first time we really hear about weird Patrick Hockstetter. We don't get a lot about him. We just hear that he's really weird. They chase after Eddie, who is on his own, and he runs away, but eventually they catch up to him. Bowers shoves gravel into his face, and an adult comes up to break it up. And at this point, Henry's gotten so crazy that he actually shoves the adult over, which Eddie realizes this like really crazy moment where all of a sudden the adult realizes that Henry isn't just gonna listen to him because he's got the maturity and the age on him. And so the adult is genuinely afraid of Henry in that moment and runs away himself. And it's interesting because like as a writer, he's taking away this like source of rescue. Like we feel like, oh, the adult's finally here to step in and rescue them and break up these kids, but like no, that doesn't do it. And then sure enough, Henry yanks Eddie's arm up behind his back far and farther and further until it breaks. They only leave because the cops show up, and the bullies all run off to get away from them, essentially. We end with Eddie laughing because he realizes that the pain isn't the end of the world and that it's actually something he can bear.
So this is like a full circle moment for Eddie, because we're seeing him in a situation where for the first time I didn't feel like he was going to be the liability of the group. It was just that his experiences up to this point had only been kind of babied by his mom. He was kind of treated as if he was a fragile person, and then not until his arm broke did he realize that like pain isn't the thing to be afraid of. Like it's like you can't go around and be scared your entire life just because you're afraid of getting hurt. And so in this moment he kind of realizes like pain isn't the end of the world. It's just something you have to go through. And he like grew as a character right here. I also think we see Henry at his craziest because we've gotten to the point now where he'll push an adult, he'll go after one of them as if it was all of them. You know, it's just Eddie. He wants to get back at the Losers Club because of the rock fight, but if he'll take anybody he can get, and he's willing to take it as far as like breaking someone's arm or
he's escalating.
Right, he would have gone further had the police not shown up.
Eddie's kind of in and out, and he wakes up in an ambulance, and he sees Pennywise driving the ambulance for a moment, but then he sees that it's not actually him. He has memories waking up in an emergency room with his mother there. She's screaming and in histrionics. Eddie and the doctor both together ask the mother to leave. He has to like kind of stand up to her to get her to go out of the hospital room. Before we move on, like this part was just really evocative to me because I've been through a car accident where I was unconscious and woke up in a hospital. And I think King did a really good job of kind of conveying a lot of the confusion about it and the in and out nature where you just see these like short scenes and have all these weird dreams and all that stuff. So
yeah, this was definitely something I was going to ask you about, because being in this hospital setting and you're so in and out of it, you don't really know what's going on. You've been through that, obviously, so I was just going to ask you what you thought.
Yeah, I mean, I really was struck by, I mean, because it's so different than my situation because I didn't know, like, why I was there. I just kind of woke up there after a car accident that I don't even have a memory of it happening. Whereas Eddie knows why he's there. So there's not as much confusion, but I guess I was just struck with how realistic the description of it was. So King had I think he probably just got this through research, because I don't think at this point he had his big accident that if you've read On Writing, you know that he had later in life where he got hit by a car. But I don't think this had happened yet in 1986. So this is just something he researched and intuited and understood and was able to put on paper. So I was impressed with it.
This is also a cool scene because we get Eddie standing up to his mom, so that character growth is continuing on even to his life with his mom, where she doesn't really approve of the people he's been hanging out with. They come to visit, and he's like, even though Eddie's in and out of it, he knows that his mom sent them away, and she kind of says you're not going to see them anymore, and he's like, well then, they start to have an argument about what Eddie had just learned from was he a pharmacist?
Yeah, Mr. King, the pharmacist.
He starts talking to his mom about how it's fake medicine and it's not helping him. Why would it say on the packaging, administer when needed, if it was a life-saving medicine?
Right. Like, and he says, you know, even over-the-counter stuff, like, tells you not to do too much of it or it'll hurt you. And so that's his proof that he kind of wields against her. And we learned that I did write down some stuff about this because I thought it was a really deftly done by King here. He is showing us this woman who has smothered her kid with her love. and her wanting to protect him. And she is almost this like villain. But he takes a moment to humanize her. And he talks about how she had to survive her husband. Did he leave her or did he die? Do you remember?
I think he died.
Yeah, I was going to say, that was what my first inclination was, but I couldn't remember exactly. So she survives that. She's a single mother with a child who then gets bronchitis when he's really young and almost dies because of that. And she is able to get work and support him. And so King really points out how, in her own way, she's actually really tough. But she's created this situation where her relationship with her son is really unhealthy because it becomes kind of her whole source of feeling of worth. And the only way she can feel like she has any worth is for her to feel needed. And so she desperately needs Eddie to want her around and for her to protect him. And she has this like nightmare scenario of him going to college and meeting a girl, and then what'll happen. And so Eddie is kind of able to use that against her here, and say that he'll play along and he'll keep taking his medicine, basically allowing her to have this connection to him as long as she will allow his friends to come visit. And so he's able to kind of do this negotiation with her. But yeah, just in general, I thought it was definitely done because it would have been easy for King to paint her as this like really reprehensible character. But instead, he finds like some true humanity there.
So when Eddie was talking to his mom, I was really interested to see how she was willing to let him hang out with his friends just because he would fake the fact that he was still using his medicine just so that she could have some semblance of control. And the fact that like as a grown adult and your son tells you that they're going to fake something just for your peace of mind, should kind of be a red flag to you that like,
yeah,
there's something going on.
But she kind of understands it and goes along with it anyway, right?
Right, for her own peace of mind, because she needs that kind of control, and that's like her normal, is like her being able to be overbearing over her son and make sure that he's not getting hurt in any way. So as long as he's faking it, she's at peace. So
next up we get the scene where the Losers Club come to visit Eddie in the hospital, which you predicted in a previous episode. And they all gather around and they decide that they're going to sign his cast. And they tell him about their plan to shoot it, and with the silver ball bearings they're going to make at the house on Neibolt Street. And there was a line here that I just wanted to quote verbatim. Another thing where just as a writer, I found really, really beautiful. So King, when he's describing the storm that is like basically laying over top the city, notices that it has changed the light in the hospital room. And he says, "The yellow storm light lay on their skins, making their faces seem distant, ghost-like, shadowy." And that's just one sentence, but like it's another sign for me of just how evocative King's prose can be, and how I think that when you take evocative prose and you combine it with brilliant characterizations and really interesting plots, like this is why King is so good. This is why he's so popular, and why he's a billionaire basically off of his writing.
In every single scene, there's so much attention to detail.
All right, so next up we get chapter 17, and we get to Beverly's section, which, oh boy, this will be interesting to talk about. She remembers being a child and going to the dump to do some test shots with her what's it called? Slingshot. And when she's there, she encounters the bullies. They are taking turns lighting each other's farts. And they're all standing around basically with their pants off. And she hides in a car, realizing that, like, oh shit, if they saw her, they were going to kill her. And she's, like, super embarrassed by the whole thing because she can see, like, all their bits and pieces. All their cash and prizes. I don't know what you're going to say.
The genital region. It was
the whole genital region, their zones.
Bev gets into the situation where she's just like happens across these kids who are like, I get lighting your farts on fire. It's super funny. You're a kid. I get it. But why are their pants around their ankles? I don't understand.
That's a good question. I'm assuming just so that it would give it like maximum distance they could get the flames.
Okay.
So it seems to be like they're like trying to get like the biggest flames possible. Anyway, Victor and Belch leave, and they leave Patrick and Henry are all that's left. And in a really disturbing moment, well, I don't know if I want to call it disturbing.
I think it is disturbing in the fact that they're so young. They're just,
yeah.
It's like a kind of a young situation to be doing this in.
Yeah, there's like a mutual masturbation thing goes on between Patrick and Henry, and she sees this, and like we've talked about in the past, this is another sign of like the secret life of kids and them not understanding their bodies and like why they feel certain ways. But then it's also combined with Patrick, who's this really creepy dude that we're about to get into his backstory, where we learn that he's all fucked up in all kinds of ways. And Henry's already this bully that we know is fucked up. So it's these two really fucked up kids. And of course, Henry kind of, once he snaps out of it, realizes that what's going on and like punches Patrick, threatens him not to tell anyone that what they did. And then he says, I'm going to tell everybody about your refrigerator if you do. And then Henry leaves, and Patrick is left just sitting in the dump, and Bev is still hiding, kind of waiting to see what happens next.
This was also interesting from Bev's point of view, because she talks about how this is her first encounter with this kind of thing, and she keeps thinking of it in terms of Bill, one of the other characters. So it's just like, it's like all of these characters are so young that they don't understand their body, like you're saying. They're all prepubescent or going into puberty, and it's
like confusing feelings, confusing, physical urges, and yeah, it's something we all have to deal with growing up. So it's King really, I think, talking about things that are so taboo. It's like we're having trouble talking about it right now, and I think that's because King knows that this stuff's really taboo. And for this book, he wanted to get to that stuff and really get to the heart of it.
Because like you say, the secret life of kids, like a lot of people go through something like this. A lot of people it'll be like formative for them, or it'll be like some sort of like scarring time in their life. And it's just one of those things that like, if you're an adult and you're like looking to a kid, you're not going to think that these are the kinds of things that are going on when they're hanging out with their friends.
Yeah. And like in a different situation, maybe it's not as like off-putting, but the way he does it here between these two reprehensible boys, it really is like this disquieting moment. And so then we learn about Patrick's backstory, and this, okay, I also wanted to say this part and the description of Patrick is scarier to me probably than any description of Pennywise up to this point. And let me get into the description here. So basically, he's like a sociopath, psychopath. We learn that he doesn't think anybody else is real, that he's the only real person. And because of this, he has no qualms about causing pain or killing things. We learned that he murdered his baby brother when he was 5 years old, smothering it in his crib, basically because he was worried about that his brother might also be real, and he didn't want his parents to throw him out because they favored the new child. And he basically murders an infant, which we get in this really brutal scene. And then he goes downstairs and he just watches TV, and there's like all the drama of them finding the dead child goes on behind him. And no one ever catches on. Only the father seems to like have a moment where he realizes what might have happened. But we learned that he never confronts Patrick about it. And so Patrick doesn't feel any remorse. And after that day, he learns basically about how much he likes killing things and how much he likes watching them die. And then we get the description of what's going on with this refrigerator, which is he's catching like local dogs and cats and strays, and basically trapping them inside the refrigerator, and then like over the series of days basically coming in every now and then, checking on them, and like watching them slowly die. And so he's this just like really psychotic, creepy kid who keeps a pencil case full of dead flies and murders, you know, animals. And like we talked about before, as a huge dog lover, this is really sickening to me. And this guy really scares me in a way that it doesn't, and it's because I think for me, I know that there are people like this, and that makes it scarier than any monster.
Like you say, this character he's like almost pure evil. He is pure evil. He is a sociopath. He's a psychopath. He's murdering these animals. He's much crazier than Henry. He's about as crazy as Pennywise. He's right there with Pennywise, but at the end of the day, Pennywise is this entity or being, and this is just a normal person doing these evil things.
It's in spirit, because you talk about him like you say he's pure evil, but he's also a normal person, and I think that's the frightening thing. Like those two things together, like yeah, he's pure evil, but he's also a person, and whereas Pennywise isn't. He's this otherworldly force. He is like this apotheosis of all monsters, whereas this is like what Ted Bundy might have been like as a kid, you know, or Charles Manson, or whatever serial killer you want to talk about. Like this guy seemed like he was on a path to where, as an adult, I could totally see him being a serial killer.
It's just crazy to think there are actually people like this out there.
Yeah, and I've actually heard this exact description for a psychopath, sociopath. Now, I think we've maybe figured out different terminology these days, but essentially the idea that they don't feel empathy, and that they often think that they're only real person, and so they don't see their victims as actual people. Like that's actually a really true thing from what I've read about those disorders. So yeah, next we get what happens to Patrick, which is he opens up the refrigerator to clean it out because he's worried about Henry Bowers kind of letting on his secret. Now he's worried about it because he knows there are rules, and he's learned that you have to follow the rules in society or you get in trouble. Not because he's worried about his secret being out for any other reason. Basically, he just knows there are rules and you can't break them. But yeah, he opens up the refrigerator, and it's full of leeches, flying leeches, which we learned that he had an experience where he had swam in the past and had some leeches on him. And so it's like the one thing he's really terrified of. And they fly out, and these things are like really nasty creatures, because they suck like huge amounts of blood out of you. We get a really gross description of one landing on his eyeball and basically sucking all the fluid out of it. It's a really brutal death where he just kind of gets swarmed by these crazy leech flying whatever creatures, and then he lands on the ground and he sees Pennywise come out of the nearby area, like foliage or dump area, and he sees that its face is running, like it's formless. And I don't know about you, but I wonder if that's because he isn't like really afraid of anything for it to take the form of. So it kind of comes out, grabs him, and drags him back to its lair, and we learn later that he wakes up as it's feeding on him.
Yeah, he's like Pennywise shows up and he's kind of wax-like, and he's kind of like you're saying, like he was like melting, and I think that's definitely like Pennywise couldn't get other than leeches, he couldn't get a read on what this kid feared, what he could become this kid feared, and maybe it was one of those things where the leeches, he wanted another thing, something scarier than the leashes, and he couldn't find it, and then he just dragged him away. And something I wanted to say about this is that, like, I think that Pennywise killed this kid in such a brutal way, and he killed him when he did because he just sees this kid as stealing his fun. Like Pennywise, it's Pennywise's job to go around and be this evil and kill all these people, and I think that he kind of kills him as a like I think Pennywise kind of just kills him because he doesn't want the competition in the area.
Interesting. I mean, I can see that. I guess I read it a different way. I don't know that either one is right or wrong, but I read it more as like he's an equal opportunity killer of kids, and this was a kid who was by himself, and he just saw his opportunity to kill him, and when he couldn't turn into anything, I don't know. It was like interesting because he also said like hello and goodbye to him at the same time. Like this was almost someone who wasn't on his radar before, and maybe he just saw this as like an opportunity to feed on him. But yeah, I mean, maybe the other thing too. I don't know. Next up, we get the losers, except Eddie, come to the dump after Bev tells them what happened. And they open up the refrigerator, and a bunch of orange pom-poms spill out. And a message is written that says, "Stop now before I kill you all. A word to the wise from Pennywise." Which I like the little rhyme there at the end. It's kind of creepily playful. And then we launch into chapter 18. Anything you want to say about that part?
I think they talk about how scary this moment was for the kids. They see this moment as like solidifying the fact that like they're going after him. Like Bill like kind of freaks out and he's like kicking the pom-poms and he's like, "Show yourself, we're coming for you, we're gonna kill you." And some of the other kids are scared, but they see Bill's kind of drive and like how much this means to him, and they know that this is there's no turning back at this point. Like this is their point of no return. The last thing that I liked about this chapter is that King breaks up his chapters into parts, and I just like that part 12, literally all that part 12 was, nothing much happened the next few weeks.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
I thought that was great. Like I just thought, I don't know. It's just one of those things. It actually made me laugh. Like I was like, oh, they just dealt with this crazy situation and this kid was just eaten alive by leeches and pulled away, and then nothing much happened for a couple weeks.
Okay, so we get to chapter 18 next, which is Richie telling Ben that it's his turn to tell a story, or to tell a memory. And Ben shows a scar on his belly, a new scar that has appeared recently, next to the H. And they talk about making slugs at Bill's house. And then we get transported back to 1958. The Losers Club are gathering the supplies they're going to need. They get a cast for a ball bearing. I think that's what it is. And then they go down into the basement, use a blowtorch to melt a silver dollar into a makeshift crucible. Then they basically funnel it into the mold, and it sets, and they make 2 slugs. And then Bill's mother comes home and kind of talks, asks them about playing Monopoly, which is what their cover story was, that they were playing Monopoly. And they all make a joke about Stan being Jewish, and they all laugh, and she's kind of horrified because she knows it's like a racist thing to say, but their like unity and the power of their group is like something that like kind of makes her step back, and she's really shocked by it.
I like that everybody realizes, basically everywhere they go, everybody realizes is like this group is special. Even the group themselves, they know that like they were here for a reason. They're 7 for a reason. I just think it's cool that there's always this like kind of, it's almost like this fate that's gone on throughout the whole story for these kids.
Next up, we get them all going to the house on Neatball Street. This is like the kind of the big cap off to this whole part, and that's their confrontation with it at this house. So they go there. Bev's the designated shooter. She's got the slugs, and she's got the slingshot. And they go in under the porch. Don't see it in the basement, basically, and decide to go up into the house proper. And when they get up there, there's like another weird moment where all the proportions start to be shifting again. And it's like a fun house mirror. He makes one of them makes a observation. And even at one point, Bill, is like screaming that it's not real, and he jumps up in the air and punches the roof, which at that point had looked like it stretched away from them. And in him punching it, it all kind of comes back into place, and he proves that it's basically an illusion. And so they all like are at risk of kind of breaking out of fear and running, but Bill kind of keeps them all together. They go down the hallway looking into different rooms, and eventually they wind up at the bathroom.
Bill is he's like the template for a good leader. He just keeps even when he's scared, even when he's in a situation where he feels like he's going to lose it, he does something that I don't know if he even realizes how important it is at the time. Like jumping up to punch the ceiling, like it could have not worked. Like it could have just gone on forever and he could have touched nothing, and it could have actually been stretching. But he jumped up, punched the ceiling, and it worked out, and it just showed that like he's got that instinct in him. He's got that leader instinct where he's like, look guys, and he's been saying it all along, like either don't believe in it or don't be tricked by it, kind of keep a level head.
Yeah, that's true. And so Bill leads them essentially into this bathroom, and they get in there and they see that the toilet has exploded, and they intuit that basically that's where it came from before, last time they were at the house. and that's there. It's the pipes from the sewer leading up to the house is like how it gets there. And as they're looking, they can like sense it coming, and it basically bursts from the pipes in this like silvery orange shifting shape with no form. And then I think it's Richie yells something about it's the werewolf, and when he says that, it coalesces into the teenage werewolf from before. And Bev shoots once but misses. The werewolf starts like kind of lunging at everybody. Really, it gets a hold of Ben, slashes him open, throws him in a tub. And then Bev calmly sights it again, this time firing and hitting it in the snout. And it creates this huge gout of blood, but now she's out of ammo. But then there's this moment where Bill starts yelling at it that they're going to kill it, and that like telling Bev to like shoot again, shoot again, shoot again. And he believes it so much that it believes it. And because of that, they scare off the werewolf. It jumps back into the drain pipe and shoots below town.
Pennywise not realizing that there wasn't a bullet in the slingshot kind of makes me think that whatever these kids believe is kind of what it knows. So if they believe that they're scared of something, then he can read their mind. Like I feel like there's certain, because we've talked about before how he can read minds. He can read their minds. Now we're in a situation where obviously he didn't read their mind because there was no slug in the slingshot. There was nothing left, and he decided to leave. I don't know if the way I read it is that he didn't want to get hit again by another silver slug, so he left.
Yeah, like it was a real danger to him, and he was convinced.
Yeah, just the power of their imagination, or the fact that they believed that, was enough to scare him off.
Yeah, and I think it shows that, a lot of his power is based off of people believing in the things he's showing them. And conversely, if people believe in the thing they're going to use against him, that also lends it a power. And that leads right into this next section where we get Ben talking about, first off, how he notices that Bill and Bev seem to have like an attraction for one another, which seems like it bums him out, but like he still feels like he's still in love with Bev. But he starts thinking about power, and he starts thinking about how, because they believed in the slugs, that gave them power, and how because they chose the form of the werewolf, which that form has a weakness to silver, that also gave it power. And then he kind of thinks like this is something that they really need to understand further when it comes time to face it.
This is what I was addressing when we were talking about that feedback that we had gotten, where silver is like seen as like this powerful thing. I think it's just that the kids are giving it this power, and it's so their belief in it is so powerful that it makes it powerful. So there was no slug in the slingshot, but because they all believed in it. And at first, I believe there was like Ben had been slashed open and he was in the bathtub, and he was like kind of remembering that there weren't any slugs left. And then he realized that the whole group as a whole was saying, shoot it, kill it, because they were all believing that there was another shot to take. So then Ben bought into it and was like, shoot it, even though he knew. And that was enough. All 7 of them together was enough to scare him off and make him actually believe there was another shot coming.
And we do get this thought as adults where I think it's Ben realizing that when you're a child, you have faith in things, and maybe you're more ready to believe in things that aren't real and lend them power. And he thinks about how now that they're adults, they actually might be at a huge disadvantage because it's a lot harder for adults to believe in things like that, to believe in Santa Claus and things like that. And so now it might even be harder for them.
I just think going forward, they're going to have to be as childlike as possible in order to defeat it.
Yeah, it's interesting. That really turns it on its head, right? Like, I think initially we feel like, wow, as adults, they're going to like be able to handle this better because, they're equipped and they're mature and they're smarter. And if they were able to do it as children, they should be able to do it as adults. But this kind of turns it on its head. Like, there's a power to their innocence that they used initially that they no longer have. And then, they're down a man as well. All right, so that's the end of that. And then we get into the 4th interlude, the last chunk here for this part. And it's Mike, and he's drunk in the library. This is at a different time, not when he's with the group. This is before he called them. And it's him kind of doing research again and transcribing his research. And he thinks about a lot of the history of the town in the early 1900s and how it rose up from the woods under these lumber barons. And then we get a description of the mass murder at the Silver Dollar. Correct me if I get any of these details wrong, but basically Hero is there. I think his name's Hero. He shows up with his axe and just starts chopping into these guys. Now, the suspicion is that these guys were responsible for murdering some of his friends at one point, who were also in the Union. But the really weird thing is that he is like bloody axe murdering these guys at the table when they're playing poker, and everybody else in the bar just like continues drinking and like having normal conversations and kind of not noticing what's going on. And really brutal description, like he chops off a guy's head, he chops off another guy's hand, he's like starts chopping apart one's body once he's already dead, like it's like kindling. Really just brutal description of an axe murder. And one guy escapes by like crawling out through the bottom of the outhouse, and but otherwise he kills like every one of this group, and then he goes back inside and he sits down and basically sits there in a stupor until the cops show up and arrest him. And then they take him to the jailhouse, and while he's there, a mob shows up, and they lynch him. And then this part ends with Mike asking the old man who's telling him this story if he remembers seeing a clown, and he does. He says that he does remember seeing a clown there, especially during the kind of the rabble rising for the mob that went to lynch him. And Mike kind of decides that this is the major thing that started the cycle back in 1905.
So these guys were trying to unionize, and these people killed them for trying to unionize back in the early 1900s. And so this guy wants to get revenge, and then I think Pennywise probably just pushes him over the edge to where he's, he goes on an axe murdering rampage, whereas before he probably would have just maybe fought them or something. So he kills all these guys, but the part that's interesting is everybody in the bar, nobody's reacting. Like there's a guy who sits at like a head rolls close to this guy who's sitting at the bar, and he just kind of kicks it away without even realizing what it is, without even caring to look. Because I think Pennywise has this power over adults and people in Derry, where it's part of being a glamour, I guess, because he's able to make them, I don't know, maybe they feel like it's less severe than it actually is when somebody's being axe murdered.
It's Pennywise's influence seems to be pervasive in this town, and it can really turn it on at certain areas and make things just go worse than they were going to go originally, I think. And that explains a lot of what's been going on if he has this power, or it has this power. Yeah, I guess now that we're at the end of this part, that's the end of part 4 here. I want to get, now that we'll be heading into the final section of this book. I'd like to hear some predictions, and then, we'll see if any of them come true. What do you think's going to happen in this final section here? As we see both, well, I mean, you can probably intuit we're going to see both the children and the adults coming head to head with Pennywise again.
Yeah, when I found out that this book was going to be partially adults coming back to Derry and then partially the kids dealing with them in the first place, I had this feeling that we were leading up to this, where it was going to be the connection of the things that are happening as adults is going to meet the things that are happening, like the themes and the ideas. I didn't think it was going to be this literal, that they were going to fight it as kids and as adults, and it was just going to be like interplayed between the two.
You called it, man. Episode 1.
Yeah.
I tried not to react too much, but I was pretty impressed. Yeah, you totally called, like, the structure of this book was exactly as you thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I didn't think that it would necessarily be them fighting it at the same time, but it's definitely, I like that it's happening this way. I think this is such a cool way to read the story. Predictions, we're going to get the 6 or 7 people in a circle. They're going to do some sort of hand cutting. They talked about the glass, using the glass to cut their hand, and that's obviously the scar that showed up eventually on Bill's hand when he was talking to his wife before he left for Derry. So I think that something has, and these scars keep popping up that weren't there before, like the one with Ben with the scar across his belly. I just think that these scars mean something. They're saying, like, they're popping up because they're remembering more and they're remembering more. And once it gets to the point where they remember everything, they're going to do the ritual. The turtle or Chud, the ritual has to do with something because he keeps showing up. A moment where I believe Chud had an influence that we didn't mention was in the Barrens, or sorry, not in the Barrens, in the junkyard area, when that kid was getting attacked by the leeches, Bev shoots a couple of the leeches out of the air, and then
it arcs the bullets, right?
exactly. So she shoots it, and it's way off course, and then some sort of force pushes it, and it curves the shot, and it kills one of them, exploding it. And so I just think that's another. It's just showing this force is gonna. I don't know if they're gonna come face to face with it, or if they're gonna realize it's something they can harness or anything like that. I think it's more just gonna be like helping them in the end. Like they're gonna come face to face with Pennywise, and they're gonna need to do this ritual in order to get the power of Chud as much as they can before they come up against him. Other predictions.
Do you think we're going to get a riddle and joke telling?
I do. Yeah, I do. I think we'll get something like that. I just think, and honestly, if we're as far the clues leading up to this are that Richie's had the most effect on him because of the jokes, because of the things that he does. So I feel like if there's going to be a joke off or anything like that, and he has to try to make Pennywise laugh, it's going to be Richie because he's the funny one. Oh, I think we might see. I don't think all the Losers Club as adults are going to make it out alive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any picks for who you think might die?
I don't know. I would be devastated if Ben died. I will say that. I think that Ben has a shot of dying because it's just like he's.
Do you feel like any of them could die? Is there anyone you feel like is safe?
I don't think Bill will die. I think Bill will make it. I think Bev is pretty safe. Eddie could die. I could see Eddie dying, but I think that Ben would be if somebody's gonna die, I think it's gonna be Ben. But I hope not. Who else? Mike. I think Michael'll probably make it. I think Michael will make it.
Okay. I won't talk about that for fear of giving any spoilers. So, I did want to mention we got a little bit more more feedback. Someone I know in real life, Chris, sent us a really nice message on Facebook saying that he was starting the book It, and he was going to listen to the early episodes and kind of read along. And yeah, I'm just happy that people are finding us and engaging with the material and enjoying it. So if you have any messages like that you want to send in, we're happy to read them.
I think what we're going for here is we're looking to do a sort of like anthology thing where even if you don't catch it as we're releasing it, we're hoping that people will be able to go back and as they read it or watch the movie, they can hear us talk about it. So I think it's cool. If you're not quite caught up with us right now, or in the future, if you're not caught up with us, just know that it's always going to be there. And so if you're interested in reading a book and then hearing what we have to say about it, go for it. Or maybe if you're not interested in reading the book and you want to see the movie and just hear what we'll have a movie episode. And I think the full experience of what we're trying to do here is if you read the book and then see the movie, we're going to be along with you the whole way. So
yeah, don't feel like you have to like listen to these as they are released. I mean, that helps us for but as we continue to build a back catalog, exactly, I want people to be able to go back and say, oh, now I'm finally reading it, or I'm finally reading whatever, and I'm going to go back and kind of experience it. And hopefully that this will be this kind of like ongoing, on-demand content that they can access as they need. Oh, and if you enjoy it, we forgot to mention last time, but reviews on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play, whatever you use to listen, leaving reviews is a really helpful way to show us some love and to help grow our podcast so that we can continue to do this and hopefully build our brand and build our podcast into having a even larger following.
Yeah, absolutely. And make sure that you're subscribing as well so that you get all of our episodes as they come out. Also, if you want to connect with us, like leave us feedback or just say anything to us, we're on Twitter at Ink2Film, on Facebook as well, Ink2Film. You can come and like our page.
Also on Instagram now, Ink2Film on there. Also, we have our website, ink2film.com. You can go there and that'll like take you to any other pathway that we have up in all of our social media accounts. So that's a really good kind of hub to use to find us.
We're in the end game now, guys. This is it. One more episode in the book, and then we have our film.
And I think this next episode is going to be a doozy. I think there's going to be a lot to talk about. So I'm really excited for it. I'm looking forward to it. And I hope you will all come and join us. Oh, we want to thank Ross Bugden for the use of our intro and outro music. Anything else?
Thank you guys for listening.
Yeah, thanks a lot. All right, we will see you next time for part 5. Oh, I did want to say, I mentioned last time that we were going to announce our new project. I think we're actually going to announce it in the next episode, so I apologize for if you were excited to hear what the next project is going to be. We'll announce it soon. We just want to wait until we finish this book before we announce the next one. But episode 5 comes out, we'll make a big announcement. I hope you guys will be excited about it. I know I am.
It's a good one, guys. Just going to go ahead and say I'm a big fan.
All right. Thanks for listening, and we will see you soon.
Bye, guys. Thanks.